Yeah. Look, there's a technique on my own. I can't read your questions because I'm using my very good phone to talk to you, and the questions come up on the screen, but I can't read them as well. I'll respond to the issues you raise even after this discussion has taken place after an hour. We'll continue with my other colleagues to continue with this. I apologize for that. It's something that we should have resolved prior to discussing with you, or maybe to have a moderator in order for us to have discussions that are very clear. I'm now wanting to expand on another issue, taking us forward on the issue of the nation. Now, the race on its own is something that can be resolved by people. It is not by choice that people have particular color and a shape. It's not by it is something that you inherit, and it has a history where people come from. If you look at how the issue of race, but what we have as a problem is white supremacy, which is the main driver of the differences between people. It continues to persist even today. I mean, in places in the Western world, in particular, you still have African being treated like lesser than human beings, and it's not because because of the perception and the teachings and how people were educated to look at African people, or people with an origin from Africa. If you go throughout the world, in many parts of the world, we continue to be confronted by this racial aspect. Whilst the PAC says we believe in the human race, we are oblivious to the current and real issues. The belief is this is where we're going. We want to educate everybody to understand that there's no need for racial superiority over other people, and think that it's a biological thing, and so on and so forth. We basically have different attributes to ourselves, and we do not, as a Pan-Africanist organization, want to promote categorization of people into what their skin color says. When we say we fight white domination, because colonialism was packaged as part of the superiority of whites, and they practiced that. That's why you had the colonizers living a better life than the colonized. What we say in the PAC with regard to South Africa is that the politics is a matter of material things. It's not a matter of any other thing in our perception. It's a matter of material things. And material here, we mean we fight over the land. And it describes the battlefield. It describes who is robbed and who is not robbed against each other, because us as an indigenous people are treated badly. In the news, you have this issue where in China, the local Chinese, it's not the policy of the People's Republic of China, but the local Chinese look at us as a people, they look down at us. That's because they have not understood Pan-Africanism. We Pan-Africanists, we talk about African civilization. That's our ultimate aim, to talk about the civilizations of Africa that people have ignored or destroyed over the years. I mean, we highlight issues such as Mapungube and Palabora, where iron was discovered and was used to trade and beautify the world and improve the world by African people. We talk about the great Zimbabwe, Munu Mutapa, cities were arranged and a form of living was held. We talk about this, our heritage, and which is a culture that we contribute to people. Africa discovered paper, for instance. Africa established the first universities. So they established, the African people established research facilities and brought a lot of people, a lot of scholars and intellectuals on the African continent to continue with establishing or expounding on issues that affect them. Medicine, health in particular, how cities and structures of government are organized, and all this culture, migration. You know, people walking, and we are the people of the first migration because there were no restrictions. If you have a pandemic or drought and so on, you could be able to move through to a safer place. Africa has established or re-established, because we must not claim it to be us alone. We re-established itself in such a way that when we say civilization, we mean the humanization of man. We don't want people to be greedy and selfish and just think of themselves. And because of our hospitality, we have been robbed, we have been exploited, and we have been put in a worse place than before. Even when we said we were prepared to reconcile, to talk to our enemies, they've always shot us. And we have a history in the PAC to talk about these things. Now, the concept of white superiority must be smashed. We need to destroy white superiority. We need to destroy white supremacy, because it infects us in almost all our lives and wants to make us feel we are more inferior compared to other peoples of the world. We need to unite Africa as a whole, including people who are in the diaspora. These are people in Jamaica, in the Caribbean in particular, in the US, in what is Latin America, including people who are in the Arab world, who are enslaved by the Arabs. We need to resolve our problems of leadership. Our leaders, they have a history. Our leaders have very easily taken to other people, and this is where our problem is. They've taken to other people and forget where they come from. Our leaders were involved in the slave trade. I mean, if you look at the history of the slave trade, some of the chiefs or leaders of people, they sold their own people to the slave traders. Fact. Some of the tribal chiefs in Southern Africa, they took their people by force, sold them as cheap labor to the mines. Fact. Some of the chiefs worked to bring people down in their particular areas. They refused to participate in a united front with all the people because they wanted to protect themselves then. We have that history. And I'm not exaggerating when I say it is the leadership of the struggle, particularly represented by the leaders of the ANC, who sold us out at Codesa. I should know, I was there. I participated in the negotiations as a delegate of the PAC. And some of the stories or the things that were happening there, too ghastly to contemplate. You know, when we think about it, we can point fingers and say this is what was happening. So the question of leadership is something that we have to look at very closely and deal with it. And most people never understand. In the PAC, we consider leadership as a very important thing because leaders represent the masses. We cannot have leaders who impose themselves on the PAC itself, who impose themselves on the masses because they have an agenda different from an agenda that our founding fathers set up for us. We are Pan-Africanists. We live and die by our belief systems, by what we believe, and we want to achieve what we believe because it's a common achievement with the rest of the masses. Now, the issue of leadership is the issue where leaders must, as it's stated in the document that propels the Africanist. It's the 1949 program of action. The leaders must come from the loins of the African masses. You can't be a leader coming from where we don't know where you're coming from. Leaders must come from the masses. They must be working for the masses. They must serve the masses. And they must adopt a position of suffering for the masses. That's what we mean when we say self-suffer sacrifice. Serve the masses. And if it means you must suffer with them. And suffer does not mean you must be isolated from anything. Adopt the position of the lowest ranking people in our societies, so that when we move and make changes, we are moving with that view of changing the bottom from us, not black middle class. That's what we mean. A black middle class are just concerned with things that they think are like they want to be appointed, they want affirmative action, they want to be appointed in a nice position, they want to go and live with whites in the suburbs, they want all these things and forget their people. So we don't necessarily, we're not against people gaining an increment in their lives, but we don't want our leaders to be blinkered and have a position where they're only thinking of themselves, like the chiefs and the traditional leaders that I've been telling you about for them. Not all of them are like, but most of them are like that. The issue that we have to confront as well as when we move ahead is the issue of what sort of society do you want to live in? How will society then work when we've come to that? We have said in the PAC that the society we are looking forward to, that we want to create, is an Africanist socialist democracy. An Africanist socialist democracy is different from African socialism. That's not what we mean. It's different from other forms of setting up society that have failed to look at how we are, for instance, opposed to totalitarianism. We don't think suppressing people and using state methods, state apparatus to bring people down is the way to go. We don't even support the concept of a hegemony. A hegemony is to have a group of people who impose themselves on societies, who impose themselves and then say their leadership without including believe in a true democracy as everybody understands it. But in this sense, it's not just for parties to beat each other up on the basis of who has the majority support, but every view in society must be accommodated. There are people who are Christians, for instance, we must accommodate them. Even within Christianity, there are various layers of beliefs. There are people who are liberals, who believe in the philosophy of liberalism. We need to accommodate them and listen to them. There are people who have various other ideas that the Muslim faith, for instance, or are inspired by the Muslim faith. All of them living in a democracy. Our sense of democracy is that even though we have, and we say this on the basis of people's ideas and belief systems, they must be accommodated in this. But it must be qualified, that democracy, in the sense that it must be looking at a total acceptance that we are living in a characteristic of Africa. We are living in a character that has its own history in Africa. That's why we are saying it must be Africanistic socialist democracy. When we say it's socialist, the socialist is a system that has a fair way of redistribution of wealth. It's not, we create economic wealth, but our wealth benefits our people, first and foremost. Our wealth benefits society. Socialism deals with two major issues. One of them is limiting big business or international business to super exploit, because international business has a tendency to do that. The big corporates have a tendency to do that, to monopolize particular section of people, like you see some of the pharmaceuticals want to come in and impose their own products on the people because you can only get it from them. So we are opposed to that. Our socialist thinking says this is one of the major problems. The other problem is that, you know, when society has set itself up in economic means, you have surplus value. This should actually happen in a political education class, but let me explain. Surplus value is we create wealth and through production, and that production distributes itself. Even if it has a profit motive, it distributes the income through issues such as wage and so on, some of the costs that are identified, including looking after shareholders. But there is also a surplus that comes because when we work, even if you find that what we work for could take us 3 hours, but we add other hours that we are not paid for. Our labor power is not paid for of the work, and that wealth accumulates through other financial products and systems, and creates wealth that people do not know where it comes from. For instance, your pension, your whatever savings that you have in the monetary policy of the country, all these things creates an environment where surplus value is created. A company starts being very small with 10 million. Before you know it, that company, through value, has become a 500 million company. So that surplus value, from a socialist point of view, should be redistributed to the masses through organs of the state. It's as simple. I try to do that, to tell you about this issue on a simple basis. So we are opposed to capitalism only on the basis that it has a tendency to exploit, especially big business or organized business in its fullness, and when it is very big. I'm trained as a political commissar, and I can say this on an ongoing basis, but I have to have interaction with you, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Dr. Seroke, I have some few questions for you. What should be done with Section 25 of Constitution?
Section 25 of the Constitution is not an isolated thing, but our view would be that the preamble must be changed. South Africa must be an African country. You cannot resolve something that is and make it mechanical. Section 25 must be expunged and taken out of the Constitution as a whole, because it says you can only resolve the issues through legal means. Who has money to take issues of land through a legal means? I mean, which communities would be able to take issues to the Constitutional Court to be resolved? At the Constitutional Court, you need high caliber lawyers, and all these things are very expensive. So we don't see Section 25 as an isolated issue, and we actually think it is aimed at creating problems. So our view that we are debating and pushing would be that you take it out and reformulate it through, obviously, through support to the people. Let's go through a referendum, a plebiscite in political terms, and see if we can get the masses to understand how this is being reconstituted.
Okay. Will the PAC resolve the land question inside the parliamentary process or outside?
In both ways. We will be able to get the mandate of the people. That's why Parliament. The mandate is very clear. It is through the votes. We need to go. A National Assembly is a forum that allows you to form policies and make laws that are suitable for the people. So we need to go and get support for that. Outside Parliament, yes, we need to get support from extra parliamentary support from the masses, from mobilizing social movements. Now, Social movements do not have a voice. Let me make an example with what is currently happening right now. The masses in their various ways are accepting to go along with the lockdown to curb the spread of coronavirus. They are making major sacrifices. They are even being pushed to do so by state organs like the police and so on. But the masses in their various ways have nothing else to benefit because they are not represented in parliament. So these social movements need to go into a pact, a represented pact. A pact is a form of understanding between political organizations as they are formulated and social movements, including civil society on a broad basis, the churches, business, and so on, because they all make contributions and come to an agreement that we will not be taken off our houses. We will have food that is brought at the lower priced foodstuffs. We will be able to have access to health, universal access to health, and the facilities must be made. No one must be taken out of the health system. All those things must be done outside parliament through social movement. So it is a balance of the two that I think would be an answer, because if you don't have a balance, it's not good. You have the masses talking to some people who are deaf, who don't listen, who have no interest of the people at heart. That cannot resolve the pact I'm talking about.
Okay. Have you considered establishing a PAC library to preserve all the history of the PAC and African people?
Yes, the PAC obviously has its own history. The history is made by the people. In 1960, the PAC said we are making history, we are changing everything. We continue to make that history. But the history is being suppressed and destroyed. The history is driven by the masses and recorded by various intellectuals and explained as we go through various generations to do that. So the PAC in its third National Executive Committee meeting agreed to set up archives of all the information, all the writings, all the thoughts that have been put together in an organized way into those archives, and let the archives be acceptable to the masses. We are still searching for other things that have slipped through the cracks and we don't know where they are, including the recorded voice of Sobuk. You can't tell me that a leader who transformed society at one point, who was talking to members of parliament, who was followed on a 24-hour basis, cannot be having his views and explained as I talk to you now. So, and we know that the reasons were to suppress Sobuk. So we need to have archives that bring together all of these things and have, so that people can think freely, and knowledge must be accessible to all at our universities. I just wanted to say one thing. Our universities are still owned by people who have nothing to do with the liberation of Africa. So we must transform the universities, not just fees must fall, not just decolonization of the curriculum, the ownership and transformation of this institution of higher learning must be done in such a way that they are Africanist in orientation, in thought, and in the viewing where we're going forward. And what they're doing, besides just being Eurocentric, they dismiss indigenous knowledge systems. They dismissed, or their methods of teachings are based on a US approach. If we are going to establish an African civilization, it must be looked at through our own eyes. So our archives, our information must be properly owned and properly treated by people with a clear conscience. Oh, I needed to say before we close, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for the engagement. And I repeat, we will continue with this on a continuous basis. Isolate.